Welcome back to the Discover podcast, where we view faith as a discovery journey with Jesus to help you become the person God created you to be. Hey there, Meadowbrook Church. In this episode, we are going to have a conversation with Bridget Harland, who's been a member of our church for well over a decade. And we're going to talk about the themes of dependence and how God uses other people to help reveal more of who He is to you. Hope you enjoy this episode. Hey there, Meadowbrook Church. Welcome back to this episode of the Discover podcast. Today I have with me Bridget Harland, who has been at our church for quite a while, longer than I have. So Bridget, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, your family, how long you've been at Meadowbrook Church, and maybe some of the ways you guys are engaged in our ministry.
Yeah, so we have been here, my husband Dan and myself and our three kids. We have Jack, who is 12, Maggie turns 10 next week, and then Becca is 7. And we have been here for, over 10 years now. And we've been involved in Meadowbrook. We initially got involved with our community groups, got connected right away into that. And I have been involved in Tapestry's women's ministry since Maggie was, a baby. So for almost 10 years.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So what we're doing with this podcast is trying to help people tell their stories, specifically the stories about what God is up to in their life in real time. But we also want to go back and say, how did you first come to faith? So where did your faith journey begin, and what was that like in your life?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home, going to church, and was in Christian school. I knew God. I had a really strong faith growing up, but didn't have like a light bulb moment or anything like that. I was kind of known as like a good girl in high school, and just really had that strong faith. But then I kind of struggled in college. I went away and really I got injured playing sports and ended up doing stuff I'm not super proud of, and kind of really lost who I was. Felt like I lost, my identity as an athlete, which I didn't realize was such a big part of who I thought I was.
Yeah.
And then I struggled for a bit until actually I met my husband, who I feel like was placed in my life at the right time, and he brought me back to church and back to, we started doing Fellowship of Christian Athletes together.
Because he was a college athlete too,
yeah,
right?
So he played football.
Yeah.
So he was like, we're going to go do this study together, and we're going to go to church, and help me recognize how far off I was at the time, and where that I really kind of let my faith go to the wayside.
Yeah. So we'll come back to that. Let's go back to when you were really young. Do you have any memories or moments of being a young kid, whether it's in elementary school, middle school, or even high school, where you felt like the Lord was present and very real to you, that you were able to like identify and understand the idea of having a relationship with Him even early on in your faith journey?
Yeah, so I had a good friend in 6th grade who was hit by a car and died. And I remember just crying out to God at night, and asking why, right? And just really struggling. And I remember God comforting me. And I don't really remember what He said or what it was, but I knew He was there.
Yeah.
But that was a really hard moment growing up for a young kid.
Yeah, because it sounds like you grew up in a context where, like, maybe if you don't have like a light bulb moment, like you said, or any huge like aha moment, faith has just always been a part of your life by way of your family's
life. Yeah.
So one of the things that often happens for people when that's the case is there comes a moment when it's like, okay, this is no longer like my family's thing, and I'm a part of this family system. It's now my thing. And so would you say it's that moment in college that like it became your thing rather than just like, hey, this is the way I was raised?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a big, it wasn't a light bulb, but it was, I needed to do it for myself.
Yeah.
And I needed to find my relationship with God. And I think it was more like rooting my identity in Christ, which I never really understood before.
So tell us a little bit more about like how you met Dan, because you told me like before we started recording that you were at a point in life where certain people in your life or Dan's life was like, oh, telling Dan, hey, you should like stay away from her.
Yeah.
Right?
So we like to say we met in calc class. But really we met in a bar.
Okay.
And
calc class is what you tell your kids, right?
Correct. It is true. I mean, he was the guy in the back of the class reading the paper. While I'm feverishly studying in front, asking questions. And we all did not like the kid in the back because he'd read the paper and get ask questions and know all the answers.
He was that guy.
Yeah, he was that.
Who wouldn't have to study and get A's on everything. Yes.
Correct.
We all hate that guy.
Yes. So that's my husband. Yeah.
Don't tell Dan that I said I hate him. So, but what about that? Like, if you're in a place where maybe somebody like Dan or having friends who's like, hey, like don't spend your time with her. Like, what happened to like actually bring you guys together then?
Yeah. So, I mean, he continued to pursue me, and wanted to take me out on a date and like actually have relationship with me. He continued to, and I remember talking to one of my girlfriends being like, he's just way too nice. Like I've never been on a real date before. He's too nice. I'm nervous that like, that he's too nice for me and like too good for me. And my friend was like, no, that's how it's supposed to be. Right. Like that's what a relationship is supposed to be. They're supposed to be good to you, which I wasn't accustomed to. So how did the Lord specifically use your relationship with Dan to bring you back to a stronger walk with him? Yeah, I mean, we started doing Bible studies together, and that was a really big thing. I'd never done a Bible study before, and I'd gone to church but never really dove in like that. So that was really huge, and just starting to find that like I could do this and and it's accessible to me as well, and having that personal relationship. So I started meeting with actually our pastor at the church that we were going to too. And because I had a lot of questions and like didn't understand, and I still have a lot of questions, but now I know that no matter what, that's okay. Like it's okay to have questions, and it's not like that doesn't mean you don't have faith. Totally. So I think that's where you can having questions is good and wanting to know is good. But I think at that time it was like, but I don't know any of these things. And so it was overwhelming. And so I think just like starting that foundation of like turn to God's word. Turn to me versus turning to other people or it just really helped me focus on that and focusing on him in all things. So did you have a moment where you made a conscious decision to say, okay, this is the life that I want to pursue? That's, disconnected from this relationship with Dan, but I want this not just to be in relationship with him, but I want this for me. Did you have like a moment where you're like, I'm deciding I'm all in on this? Yeah. I remember leaving church one day and like feeling extremely convicted, almost in tears, and just not feeling worthy. And Dan's dad actually like caught me after, and he's very like reserved, quiet guy, but when he talks to you, it's like, there's something he's going to say, right? Like, cause he's not as outspoken. And he just like pulled me aside and asked what was wrong. And I told him like that I just did not feel worthy. And he's like, none of us are. And that was just really powerful, and hit me to the point where I was like, okay, none of us are worthy. He still comes to save us all. And so like a lot of it was me forgiving, like learning that I need to give it to God, and I'm holding on to it when he's already forgiving me. And so almost like you need to forgive yourself. Correct. Too. Correct. Which might sound like a weird thing to say because we don't like to think that we have
a relationship with ourselves that we need to forgive ourselves.
Yeah.
But in many ways, we do. A lot of people hold on to the shame, whatever, the conviction, whatever, as a way to feel like that's their penance for whatever they've done. But in reality, like part of embracing Christ's forgiveness is allowing yourself to feel free and forgive yourself for whatever your past is.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, to be honest, I still struggle with that. And like it comes up every now and again. I had a friend reach out to me because this girl from college was like, I can't believe she's in Bible studies now.
Right.
And like, I think it was supposed to be an encouragement, but it was like, oh, like a sink, like, oh, that's like
that old me is coming back to
and
haunt
so
me or whatever.
right.
Yeah.
But it also is testament to how God can change us.
Totally, 100%. So you guys get married somewhere along the way, finish school, you move forward in life. You're at Meadowbrook Church. So what has been like beyond that chapter of your life? Some other pivotal moments in your faith journey and your faith development?
Yeah, I feel like God has to put me in my place in order to tell me what he wants me to know. Like that I have to kind of hit the floor or just have something almost bad happen in order sometimes for me to like recognize that I need to turn to him more. We were married, probably 2 years, and I had my third knee surgery, and this is before kids. And then like 5-6 years later, I ended up having, I don't know, my fourth or something knee surgery, and we had 3 little ones at the time.
Yep. Knee surgery that was from like playing sports.
Yeah, so I had tore my ACL playing my left in high school, my right I tore playing volleyball and basketball in college 2 times, and then came back a third.
Yep.
And then I was done with sports.
Yeah.
So that's really when I struggled in college, was after hurting my knees.
And you couldn't play sports anymore. So did you have to stop playing like for like the school?
Yeah, I could have come back, but I knew I couldn't come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this last one I had was when I think Dan and I had been married maybe 6 or 7 years. We had 3 little kids. Our youngest was, so Jack, our oldest was 4, Maggie was 2, and Becca was a baby.
Yep.
And I had to be on crutches for 16 weeks. I remember I've been involved in tapestries for about 2 years, like going to study, which had been so helpful to me. And when this happened, we had 1 full bathroom upstairs, 3 little babies, and I couldn't do anything for anyone. Dan was in his training for medical school, so I think he was a resident, which means he couldn't take any time off.
Right, and working crazy hours.
Yeah. And through all of that, God provided.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to surrender everything. We had to get someone to come in and essentially take care of my kids for me. We had to get people to come drive Jack to school who I didn't know.
So some lady pulls up to the house.
I had to arrange rides through school. And so I set up these rides. A woman who lived close, and we also didn't live in Brookfield. Our kids are at Brookfield Christian School. So we were in Milwaukee. So finding someone who's willing to do rides, I was nervous about because we didn't live as close. They set up a ride for us. A woman shows up to pick up my son who I didn't know, and I had to let him get in the car with her.
Some random lady.
Yeah. Turns out she works at the school. She actually works at the church associated with the school, and I was like this really amazing person. Right. But at the time, I had no idea.
Yeah. And he was how old, you said?
And he was 4.
Yeah.
I remember just letting him walk out, and I was just in tears, just bawling, and praying, Lord, protect my baby. I don't know what's gonna I trust that you will get him there safely, and just all these things were out of my control. Yeah. And I'm a control freak and like to be able to manage things at home. And I think that was a really big impact, not only on me in my faith journey but also my marriage, my kids, all the things. God was using that and helping me rely on others. And I think the biggest thing I recognized is how relationships grew during that time.
Yeah.
And
you said 16 weeks, right?
Yeah.
That's a long time to be
yeah.
like, immobile and not be able to carry a kid around or
Yep.
do whatever you needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it was hard. I had meals provided to me. It was just God provided all things for us. And I mean, it was a hard time, but he used it for me to rely on him.
Yeah. So one of the things we talk about is disruptors in our life are moments where we use the language of Kairos moments, these moments where the kingdom comes crashing into our life, these moments where God is trying to teach us something, he's trying to grow us.
Right.
And it's not that God necessarily causes the disruption. It's not as though God causes the knee injury, but those moments, for some reason, we have greater awareness, right? If we're trying to diligently seek the Lord and follow him, like we probably have greater awareness in our life because it's like, what else do I do? Where else do I turn? And you have to learn dependence in a new way. And in that moment, you're dependent on people, some of which are strangers who you don't even know. And you're saying to, hey, take my kid and get to school okay. You know?
Yep.
Any other moments during that season that really stick out to you that were teachable moments for God in your life?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've had a lot of medical issues too, I would say. So our son has had some stuff, and then our daughter Maggie, when she was 2.5, so this was timeline I can't remember, but she was hospitalized too. And so that was a big, she had a grand mal seizure at home. And actually I was at church singing.
I remember that. I remember the day.
And Dan couldn't get a hold of me. And thankfully he was able to get a hold of someone here at church because he was rushing to the hospital with Maggie because he found her unresponsive at home. And everyone here was like, what can we do? How do we get, I had people taking care of the other kids. I had people coming to, support us and love on us. And honestly, she's been totally healthy too. I mean, we had a moment in the hospital where she was literally going stir crazy, because she had a grand mal seizure and then was kept there for 3 days. So she literally had these a tether. She was tethered to the wall as a 2.5-year-old.
With like some sort of device.
So she had little things all over her head and she couldn't move. And so she literally went stir crazy and was thrashing in her bed. And it was like an hour and a half of that. And at one point, all we could do, we were just like in tears and praying. Yeah. And to this day, she hasn't had any more seizures. She's been she's now off seizure meds. God healed her. We have no idea why it happened. Why it happened. The doctors were like, she should have had, she didn't have any developmental delays or anything, which typically in a seizure that large, she would have had little ones prior.
Yeah.
And so they were like, she has no developmental, and we're like, no, nothing.
Wow.
And again, it's just utter dependence on God, right? Leaning on him and the people he puts in our lives. We've had so many people come and help us. Yeah. And building, and it's just builds that relationship that you need.
Yeah. So naming, people coming around you in hard moments.
Yeah.
And having to learn dependence. I do think that's one of the more challenging things for control freaks. And I say that as somebody who likes control, right? Yeah. I like to control things. I don't like to be in places where I'm uncertain. I like to know what's coming next. Dependence is a really hard, but maybe one of the more important things to learn for those seeking to follow Jesus, because so much of our life really is out of our control. We live with the illusion. Those who are control freaks, we live with the illusion of control.
Absolutely.
We don't have control like we think we do. So what has been happening in your life in more recent days where you've continued to learn dependence and the need for people to support you and come around you as you reflect on kind of the more recent years of your faith journey?
So I think the biggest thing is I've been doing, I've been attending tapestries and been really loving serving that, coming and learning and diving into Bible study. I had been asked probably when Becca was a baby, to teach by Rachel McKinney. I'll never remember her coming to my house and asking, like sitting down with me, like, I think you could teach. And I was totally thrown off. And I was like, absolutely not. I literally right away said, no way. I cannot do this. This is overwhelming. I'm not qualified. I've never studied. Like, I'm a new believer, relatively new, diving into God's word. Like, I don't have the qualifications. So I said no. And then I think like 4 years later, you did a sermon series on the call. And all I could hear was God telling me tapestries. And I knew he was calling me to do that. And
to specifically teach.
To teach.
4 years later.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And so I met with Rachel and Andrea and talked about it. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And then I was like, wait, what? What did I sign up for? And still felt very anxious and nervous and stressed out. Frankly, really struggled that first year teaching. I've never taught before. I've never written a 30-minute talk, let alone, I mean, it was just extremely overwhelming.
What was your like your training in, and what did you do vocationally?
Yeah, so I'm a social worker.
Yeah.
So I'm home now, but I have my master's in social work, and I worked in the hospital for 10 years doing that.
So the skill of teaching, very different than anything
Correct.
you would have done training-wise, development-wise, vocation-wise.
Yeah, correct. More comfortable one-on-one working with people versus like public speaking and teaching.
Right. Especially people in hard situations.
Correct.
Or crisis moments or whatever.
Yeah.
Like to walk into a crisis moment where somebody's life is falling apart, no problem.
Yeah, that I got.
Right. Standing up in front of a room of people saying things for 30 minutes scares you to death.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I felt, honestly, I multiple times during that first year was like, I'm not going to do this next year.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think this is right. I don't feel qualified. And yet God continued to use it and brought a couple of really important friends into my life who encouraged me and like brought certain things like tools and resources to use to help that like really encouraged me this past summer and just, totally changed my perspective on it. And now it's like been really joyful. And it's still really hard and it's not easy by any means, but I'm not scared. I'm not anxious as anxious. I shouldn't say I'm not at all, but I know God's using it now, and I feel more confident in that He can use me, even though I didn't go to Bible school. I didn't go. Like, I know He can use me in what He's calling me to do.
Did you ever have a specific moment where, like, you just noticed a difference in either your attitude or your posture, or something like came alive for you, or somebody had a reaction to something you said that kind of really encouraged you to like, oh, this is something God is using?
Yeah, so I think one of my last teachings at the end of the semester last spring, I got really good feedback and like encouragement on like what I taught on and what I brought to the table, and like that it's also hard because there's different styles of teaching, and so it was nice to hear that they enjoy all different styles and like having different perspectives coming in, and so that really just like made me feel like, oh, maybe I should stick with this, right? And then it was just another person being like, hey, I found this cool, like, I would love to do this teaching with you, like go through this teaching series with you. And that was like, that would be awesome. Like, that's what I'm like needing is like, how do I put this together? Like, how do I like actually like just the basics of writing a talk and like going through that, like it helped me like formalize it. So it's just, I mean, I think it's been really cool to see how God has like put certain people in front of me there to encourage me.
Totally. Yeah, that's great. So as you think about kind of where you're at in life now, like God has brought you a long way from childhood through college to where you're at now. What would you say in recent days is something that God is teaching you, or things that you feel like he's inviting you into that you in real time are having to discern? How do we engage with what God is doing in our life right now?
Yeah, I think always heavy on my heart is serving the community, and that's the social worker in me. And so just finding ways to serve.
Yep.
And I had reached out to one of our partner organizations and was able to bring a meal to them recently and just like talk to them about like, what needs do you have? What, what things are you guys needing? And it's just cool. I think, I have to figure out there are a couple different options, but there are some ways that we could serve even as a family.
Yeah.
And so trying to discern whether or not like we can do that as a family, we can, if that's where God wants us right now, and just trying to navigate like how we can use these opportunities.
Yeah.
And also bring opportunities here to Meadowbrook too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things we're always looking for is for people who have a desire to like either do something new or help us develop something that's underdeveloped. Because even though like our church is, fairly like healthy, well-established, like we always have things that we can improve, always have things that we could develop further. And we need people who are like, hey, I can do that. And I have a passion to do that. And I have a desire to do that. And I think sometimes in those moments, when people see like, oh, there's this thing over here that we could be doing, sometimes people dismiss that as like, the church just isn't doing what they should be doing, when in reality, that might be God actually stirring something in you to bring that, because our mindset of the church really is, hey, like this isn't the professional staff or the paid staff who are called to do this. Like we have some ability to do more of that because it is our job, but we need like the people of the church to actually do new things or start new initiatives. And so, I appreciate that you're even like thinking that. And it's not just about like, hey, that helps us, but it's the discipleship idea of that. As you step into those new things, as you step into those uncomfortable things, as you really just follow the leading of what you think God is doing, that's how you grow in your own faith, in your own discipleship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it seems like there's this theme of people in your life encouraging you, coming alongside you. There's this theme of learning dependence and God bringing you into hard situations to teach you dependence. Anything else that you would identify as like, what God is kind of teaching you in this season as we kind of wrap up and bring our conversation to a close?
Yeah, I just think it's cool to see how God encourages us through people, but that I always also recognize that like we can do that as well. And so, times where I really struggled, and I recognize this in other people. You can see like people who are really struggling, you can see their faith in it. And it's always like, I hope that like when I'm struggling or when like that we can still show God through that. Yeah. And I think that's so powerful. And like we can, by leaning on those people and building those relationships, just help each other lean on God, right? When we're struggling and when we're in need. And I just think there's a reason why God has created us to be in fellowship with each other.
Totally. Yeah, my hope would be for anybody listening to this that if you're, on the fence of like getting involved in a neighborhood community, if you're on the fence about like being more regular on Sunday morning, that you would be able to see that like one of the things we hope people experience here is relationship. But I hear from people regularly that Meadowbrook is welcoming, Meadowbrook is inviting. We want to be a highly relational church because we believe that it's in the relationships with one another we grow in our relationship with the Lord. And as we help one another and allow people to help us, it continues to teach us dependence. It continues to teach us what God desires from us, both in the receiving and giving support. So thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today. I really enjoyed the chance to chat with you. And Meadowbrook Church, hopefully you found this to be helpful, and we look forward to our next conversation. Have a great rest of the week.